Okay, we're going to talk about the assembly process for the hoist winch. So we have everything laid out here, and when you do your assembly, there will be a hoist winch on your table that you can use as a guide. As many times as I've done this, I still need that to make sure I don't put it together wrong. So when you get to this point, okay, you should have already obviously made everything. And it's a good idea if you have everything graded first, because I may find problems during the grading process that we can fix that will help you greatly during assembly. So you've got everything graded, you're ready to put it together, you come see me, we'll give you a Carl's Jr. cup full of parts, the bolts and the nuts and the things that you don't make, so you can finish putting it together. Okay, so what I've done here is, you don't need to do this, but I've laid everything out in the order that it sort of assembles as like a big exploded view, so you can sort of see how this works. And I have a cold, which isn't going to help our sound on this thing, but that's okay, we'll get through it. Okay, so on your drawing packet, okay, here's the front page. The back 2 pages are assembly instructions, and it tells you all the tools you need and everything. Okay. Assembly procedure. Step 1, have lab number stamped on appropriate parts as shown on drawings. We will have already talked about that during grading. Step 2 says deburr and clean all parts. That's probably already been done. Maybe not the clean part, but they should all be deburred already. Step 3 says inspect subcontracted parts and accept or reject. In your Carl's Jr. or whoever's cup you end up with are all the parts that we made, okay, such as the frame pawl spacer. You should check these against the drawing and make sure they're correct. Number 4 says have parts graded before assembly. Okay, we already talked about that. Okay, the actual first step of, or actually no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Step 5 says, this is a reminder, should already been done, form spring seat in one handle part. Rivet handle pieces together. Okay, that should have already been done prior to grading as well. Number 6 says, be sure drum spacer number 2 slides through handle number 33 and cable drum number 1 freely. Okay, so the drum spacer is the part you made on the lathe, one of the two. It should freely slide through the cable drum. Okay, and the handles. And you also might look and make sure that it's pretty much perpendicular to the handles. Okay, you probably, in order to get this to slide freely, you will probably, after you rivet the handles together, you probably want to go back to the same reamer that you reamed the holes and just hold the part like this and just pretend this is the reamer. Just run it right up on the reamer all the way through both holes. Okay, that'll, especially after powder coating, you'll have paint in the holes and you're going to need to do that again. You will probably need to drill out the paint from all the rest of the holes. Okay, so on the tables we'll have a 5/16 drill that you can re-drill the holes. While I'm thinking about it, if you look at the handles this way, if your handles are slightly parallelogrammed, I'll call it, that's going to cause problems too. So what you can do is you can grab it in a vise. If it's already painted, put some cardboard or something around it to protect it. And you can put a crescent wrench on here and you can twist these so that then when you look at them they're parallel. Okay. Then you may need to re-ream the holes, but you want them to basically be parallel so that when you look at it like this, they're parallel to each other, the spacer's perpendicular, and then this way the spacer should be perpendicular and level. Okay, so let's see, next step, it says assemble handle ratchet components 34 through 42 and tighten nut. Be sure spring action works. Okay. So I've got everything laid out here. What you're going to do is you're going to take and put the pawl adjuster over the spacer. Okay, backward. Okay, the pawl fits between the 2 ears. And you'll have one on your table. I'm going to kind of make sure that I got the pawl backwards. I'm going to make sure that I get everything set right. Okay, this actually doesn't need to be yet. And then this drops in here like this. Oh, actually, I'll probably have, notice the step on the spacer is a little bit longer than the pawl and the pawl adjuster are thick. So I'm going to put a brass washer right there. In fact, I'm going to put 2. You basically want the washers to be just below the end of the part. Okay. Now then, the pawl adjuster is going to sit like this. So if I bring this up through there like that. Different ways you could do this, but you may feel kind of clumsy no matter how you do it. Anyway, now I've got the bolt through there. Okay, now this flat washer needs to be on this side, so I can just pull this back a little bit, put the washer in there. Okay, now that's all the basic ratcheting components. Okay, now before you put the drum in, make sure you put this bent spring in here, because without the drum, the pawl has a lot of freedom to move. With the drum in there, it can only move a little bit, and this becomes much more difficult. So the spring fits underneath the edge of the washer, and then stick it in the 1/8" hole in the pawl adjuster. And again, this is easy to do without the drum in place, but once you get the drum in there, it's pretty tricky. Okay, now I'm going to put on the lock washer. Okay, here's another point I want to make. It may not be visible in the video, but the threads on the bolt go right up to the handle. We try to buy the bolts with the right length thread, but it's hard to get them exact. There may be times that you get a bolt where when you put the nut on with the lock washer, okay, the nut stops turning and you think you're tightening these, but it may have run out of threads before it actually clamps the parts. One way you can tell, when you tighten it, once you get the nut tight, if you can still easily spin the bolt, that tells you ran out of thread before everything was clamped. So what you'll have to do is take the nut back off, take the bolt out, and we have a 5/16 18 threading die. So what you can do is grab your bolt by the head in the vise using soft jaw, don't mar the head, and then you just spin the die down until it gets to the end. Put a couple of drops of oil on there and turn it. You probably only need about 1 or 2 threads. What you don't want is you don't want threads all the way inside your handles or your frame members, because that creates a stress riser where the axial load will be. Okay, so that's how you can do that. So there's your finished assembly minus the drum. Now, if you hold on to the pawl, okay, that nice crisp snap action, that's what you want. Okay? Now I actually realize I just made a mistake. I put the 2 washers between the pawl adjuster, or sorry, between the pawl and the pawl stop. They actually go back here between the pawl adjuster and the spacer, so I'll fix that.